Hey guys, tonight we're drifting gently into one of history's most bonkers medical chapters, Victorian medicine, where the doctor's best advice for your troubles was, have you tried cocaine? That's right. Before it was the party powder of choice for Wall Street bankers, it was the miracle cure for everything from toothache to shyness to, believe it or not, hay fever. And don't worry, if that didn't work, your doctor also had leeches, arsenic, and some positively haunted medical gadgets in their bag. So, before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise, and make sure your feet are tucked in, just in case a rogue Victorian pharmacist tries to sell you a tonic through your window. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to walk into a pharmacy and get handed a bottle of liquid confidence, courtesy of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine? Would you trust a doctor who prescribes you pick-me-ups that could literally power a steam engine? Did people ever actually sleep? Or were they just vibrating in bed, listening to their own tea chatter? How many illnesses did Victorians invent just so they could justify another restorative trip to the chemist? And when your child caught a cold, did the doctor recommend a warm bath, a brisk walk, or just a direct injection of uncut optimism? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1895, in the golden age of medical confidence, questionable science, and enough stimulants to keep all of London awake for a decade. You're about to experience what it's like to be treated by a Victorian doctor who's armed with a top hat, a walrus moustache, and a truly heroic misunderstanding of chemistry. Good luck. You shuffle into the doctor's waiting room, a space decorated with sepia-toned wallpaper, wilting ferns, and the lingering aroma of carbolic acid, also known as the world's least comforting air freshener. The other patients eye you suspiciously, clutching their handkerchiefs and bottles of cough syrup that may or may not contain enough morphine to sedate an ox. The seats are arranged in a polite but unmistakably hostile semicircle, as if everyone's symptoms might leap across the room with a running start. There's a coughing contest underway between an elderly man and a young mother. The winner will get to keep the only clean handkerchief left in London. You settle in on a hard wooden chair, instantly regretting it, because the seat has roughly the same give as a marble tombstone and makes your left buttock go numb before the doctor even calls your name. Somewhere, a child is gnawing on a biscuit that's definitely seen better centuries, leaving a trail of crumbs that mingles with the dust and whatever else Victorians considered part of the atmosphere. The ticking of a large, slightly judgmental grandfather clock in the corner marks the passage of time with exaggerated slowness, each tock reminding you that you're already late for 3 other appointments, including your own funeral, if this cold doesn't improve. You glance around and realize that everyone is, in their own way, performing an interpretive dance of discomfort. One man massages his temples with desperate circular motions, eyes closed in silent prayer to the gods of aspirin, which, incidentally, has not yet been invented. A woman in a high lace collar fans herself with a pamphlet titled On the Nervous Temperament, while her friend keeps offering her drops from a mysterious blue bottle that smells suspiciously like window cleaner mixed with gin. Your fellow patients are clearly sizing you up, the unspoken question hanging in the foggy air. Are you contagious or just unlucky? Every cough is a threat, every sneeze a declaration of chemical warfare. You try not to make eye contact with the man whose nose is running at a speed that would get him arrested on most Victorian streets. Instead, you examine the waiting room's reading material. Several months, old issues of Punch magazine, a medical almanac full of gruesome woodcut diagrams, and a faded etiquette guide reminding you not to expel wind with audible expression in public spaces. Above it all hangs a portrait of Queen Victoria herself, gazing sternly down as if to say, "Don't bleed on the carpet." The ferns droop mournfully from their pots, probably hoping someone will prescribe them a little cocaine tonic, too. The The carbolic acid smell intensifies whenever the door opens, a doctor's attempt at cleanliness. But mostly just an olfactory slap that reminds you medicine isn't about comfort, it's about survival. And the noise. Victorian waiting rooms are never quiet. There's the hacking, the polite throat clearing, the barely restrained sobs of a man who's been told he has sensitive nerves and must now avoid cheese for the rest of his natural life. Somewhere, a nurse shouts for Mr. Arbuthnot, who startles so violently he drops his entire bottle of tonic, which, let's face it, was probably 40% pure hope and 60% distilled regret. Minutes stretch on like hours, and you find yourself questioning whether you actually feel worse now than when you arrived. There's something about the atmosphere, a blend of fear, boredom, and whatever the last patient coughed onto the doorknob, that seems to intensify all known symptoms and invent a few new ones just for good measure. Finally, just as you're about to nod off, your name is called. You rise unsteadily, aware that by simply surviving the waiting room, you've already passed the first and most grueling test of Victorian medicine. As you follow the nurse down a corridor lined with more withering ferns and stern reminders to trust the science, you realize that in this era, the waiting room isn't just a place you pass through, it's where your symptoms go to socialize, mingle, and, if you're unlucky, multiply. The doctor's office is both grand and a little menacing, with shelves full of dusty medical volumes, a few mysterious jars, and a portrait of some distant, frowning ancestor who probably died of bad air. You sit awkwardly in a creaky chair while the physician, impeccably mustachioed and armed with an air of total authority, reviews your symptoms. Headaches? Check. Sleeplessness? Absolutely. General dissatisfaction with life, career, and the endless fog outside? The doctor nods. These are classic symptoms of the Victorian era's favorite invisible foe, nervous exhaustion. Victorian medicine is absolutely obsessed with nerves. If you ever felt tired, anxious, weepy, twitchy, prone to fidgeting, averse to social events, or simply not yourself, congratulations. You are officially suffering from a crisis of the nervous system. Your nerves, the doctor explains, are delicate, sensitive, easily overwhelmed by the modern world of steam engines, telegrams, and, he glances at your shoes, synthetic dyes. The human body, he assures you, was simply not designed for so much progress, so much noise, so much, well, everything. He opens a massive leather-bound book and rattles off a list of recent cases. Mrs. Peabody, afflicted with a sudden aversion to lace curtains. Mr. Bellwether, reduced to fits of melancholy by loud geese. Even Queen Victoria herself was rumoured to have fragile nerves, though in her case, the diagnosis often came with a side order of hysteria. No symptom is too mild, too odd, or too vague. If you have ever sneezed and felt slightly anxious about it afterward, it's the nerves. Your doctor pulls out a gleaming stethoscope, which he places reverently on your chest before moving it, apparently at random, around your torso. He listens intently to your breathing, which you do your best to keep steady, knowing full well that erratic respiration is the hallmark of the terminally nervous. He checks your pulse, frowns, and then inspects your tongue. "Ah," he says gravely, flaccid and pale, the classic tongue of neurasthenia. You're not sure what that means, but you nod along as if your tongue has just failed a major life exam. Then comes the barrage of questions. Do you ever worry about the future? Sometimes. Do you ever wish you were somewhere else? Frequently. Do you enjoy cold mutton? Never. He writes these down with quick, confident strokes, pausing only to peer at you over his pince-nez glasses. You, my dear patient, he concludes, are experiencing a most profound case of nervous exhaustion. It is remarkable that you managed to walk here at all. In the Victorian mind, nerves are the root cause of everything. Toothache, the nerves. Stomach upset, the nerves. Lost your keys? Absolutely the nerves. Even physical injuries, a sprained ankle, a stubbed toe, are not immune. The doctor explains that your nerves are overwrought, having absorbed too many shocks from your daily commute, your disagreeable landlady, or the general existential terror of living in the 19th century. But fear not, because Victorian doctors are nothing if not resourceful. The solution to your nervous calamity comes in a small glass vial, labelled in elegant script, cocaine hydrochloridum, for restorative purposes. The doctor hands it to you with a flourish. This, my friend, will strengthen the nerves, invigorate the mind, and restore you to the very picture of health. Take 2 drops before breakfast, and perhaps another after any episode of existential dread. You examine the vial. The clear liquid shimmers with the promise of immediate improvement. Don't worry. The doctor reassures you it is perfectly safe. Why? I prescribe it to the vicar, the butcher, even my own wife, though only when she is forced to endure her mother's company for longer than 20 minutes. You hesitate for a moment, but the doctor's confidence is overwhelming. He tells you that modern science has proven cocaine's miraculous ability to banish melancholy, sharpen the intellect, and restore lost ambition. You're encouraged to combine the drops with a brisk walk, a hearty meal, and, if you have the means, a short seaside holiday. The prescription is, in essence, optimism in a bottle. You leave the office buoyed by the promise of restoration. Your nerves reassured that, whatever may befall you, fog, geese, or cold mutton, you now possess the cure. In Victorian England, everything may be nerves, but nerves are nothing a little cocaine can't fix. It's early morning in your respectable Victorian household, and you awaken not to the gentle aroma of coffee, but to the distant clatter of horse-drawn milk carts and the sweet, spicy scent of your housekeeper's freshly opened restorative tonic. The sky is the color of dishwater, the fog is thick enough to chew, and everyone in the house is shuffling around with the weary, blank-eyed enthusiasm of people who would rather be anywhere else, including, quite possibly, the Crimean front lines. You stumble into the kitchen in search of breakfast. But here, breakfast isn't so much a meal as a daily strategic operation, one designed less to nourish and more to launch you into your morning with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for professional fencers. The secret ingredient? A heaping dose of pharmaceutical confidence, freshly decanted from a bottle marked breakfast elixir. Invigorating, energizing, and especially recommended for ladies, gentlemen, and those suffering from the modern condition. Your housekeeper is already at the table, pouring herself a measured teaspoon of the syrup into her tea, which she stirs with a look of weary determination. "It's for my nerves, sir," she explains, although by the way she's vibrating it might also be for her ambition to finish all the laundry before sunrise. You glance at the label. Among the ingredients, coca leaf extract, a hint of ginger, a lot of sugar, and for reasons no one can quite explain, a trace amount of silver nitrate. The word cocaine isn't even hidden in tiny letters. It's printed proudly, a selling point, just above the logo of a deeply satisfied-looking lion. Breakfast in this house means more than just food. There's the expected porridge, thick and lumpy, studded with raisins and a light sprinkling of cinnamon, if you're lucky, and the local grocer hasn't replaced it with wood shavings again. There's also health bread, which is just regular bread pretending to be medicinal, and digestive biscuits, which serve the dual purpose of breakfast item and potential replacement for roof tiles. But it's the morning invigorator that everyone is truly after. Children, who should by all rights be eating plain oats and running late for the schoolroom, are instead waiting for their spoonful of Dr. Pemberton's nerve syrup. It tastes faintly of oranges and gasoline, and after one dose, young Edward is wide awake, reciting Latin declensions at a speed that frightens the family dog. The baby gets a half dose in her milk, just enough to keep her gurgling contentedly for the next 6 hours. Even Grandma, who claims to mistrust modern remedies, has quietly replaced her morning sherry with a pick-me-up that would make a modern pharmacologist faint. The ritual is always the same. Measure, sip, grimace, then suddenly feel as if the entire day is winnable. Problems that loomed large, overdue bills, relentless damp, existential dread, shrink into manageable details. There's talk at the table about the neighbor's scandalous new bicycle, about the Queen's latest decree, about how everyone seems so very much more productive since energizing tonics became a household staple. No one mentions the collective insomnia, the new family hobby of rearranging the silverware drawer at midnight, or the fact that sometimes Uncle Herbert can hear colors. You finish your tonic, feeling the jolt in your bones. Outside, the world is grey and slightly menacing, but inside, you are ready to attack the day. You could walk to work, run to work, or possibly invent a new kind of work on the spot. The Victorians genuinely believed they had unlocked the secret to modern living. And, for a brief, chemically charged hour every morning, you start to believe it too. It's only after the second spoonful and the third round of energizing toasts that you notice nobody in the house has sat still for more than 30 seconds. The dog is barking at his own reflection. The maid is ironing everything that doesn't move. And the parlor fern has somehow relocated itself to the windowsill. The day stretches ahead, bright with possibility, and buzzing with the promise that as long as there's tonic in the cupboard, you can outrun fatigue, boredom, and maybe even mortality itself. And if that doesn't work, there's always tomorrow's breakfast. You don't know how you ended up in Vienna, but here you are, perched awkwardly on a tufted divan in the consulting room of one doctor, Sigmund Freud. The walls are lined with books, mysterious statuettes, and enough cigar smoke to make you question your commitment to breathing. Freud, still young and spry, and not yet weighed down by the enormous responsibility of explaining everyone's mother issues, greets you with a firm handshake and eyes that glint with barely suppressed scientific enthusiasm. Freud asks how you're feeling, and you do your best to sound casual. A little tired, perhaps. Restless at night. Not quite yourself lately. He nods gravely and says, "It is the pace of modern life, my friend. The nerves. Always the nerves." He scribbles something on a notepad, then reaches into his desk drawer and, with the flair of a magician, produces a small brown bottle with a handwritten label. Cocainum. He winks, as if he's just let you in on the best secret in Vienna. In the 1880s, Dr. Freud is still something of a rising star, a neurologist who's convinced that the future of medicine is hiding in plain sight, somewhere between the chemistry set and the liquor cabinet. And right now, Freud's greatest professional passion is a white, crystalline powder he believes could cure just about anything. Depression, fatigue, shyness, indigestion, even a stubborn case of the Mondays. He unscrews the cap, dips a glass rod, and offers you a taste. For scientific purposes, he insists, as if you're collaborating on a major breakthrough. The powder is bitter, a little numbing, and makes your lips feel like they're about to float off your face. Freud smiles encouragingly. Marvelous, isn't it? It awakens the mind. The gloom lifts, the world grows sharper, and one is filled with the most vigorous energy. He's not kidding. Within minutes, your head feels clear as spring water. Your exhaustion evaporates. Your anxiety about the fate of your immortal soul is suddenly replaced by the urge to alphabetize Freud's library. Across the room, the man himself is pacing back and forth, occasionally breaking into a rapid-fire monologue about repressed memories, dream interpretation, and why the Viennese opera is vastly overrated. He pauses only to dab a bit more cocaine on his gums, then launches into another excited explanation of how he plans to publish a paper on the miracle compound. It will cure morphine addiction, he declares. It will rescue us all from the tyranny of melancholia. You nod along, eyes wide, as Freud describes his grand plans. An end to human misery, the banishment of fear, perhaps a little dancing in the street for good measure. The idea that cocaine might have a downside hasn't yet occurred to anyone in the room, least of all Freud. For now, The only side effect is excessive optimism and maybe a sudden, overwhelming desire to discuss your childhood at length. The consultation continues. Freud asks searching questions about your dreams, your habits, and whether you've ever harbored a secret wish to move to the countryside and raise sheep. He listens carefully, occasionally jotting down notes and sprinkling his advice with generous recommendations for more invigorating powder. Every answer is met with enthusiastic approval. You see, this is the clarity we achieve with science, he beams. The world suffers from too much inhibition. Cocaine is the answer. We shall all be liberated from our neuroses. Outside the consulting room, Vienna is bustling, and you realize you're seeing it through entirely new eyes, eyes that frankly might never close again. Freud bids you farewell with a handshake, a pamphlet on dream analysis, and a complimentary sample of his favorite compound. You're sent back into the world, buzzing with the possibilities of medical progress. It's only later, long after you've left Freud's office, that you start to wonder if perhaps there's such a thing as too much clarity. But for one brief, effervescent, Victorian afternoon, Dr. Freud's wild ride feels like the future, one in which nerves are calmed, ambition is endless, and sleep is, frankly, optional. If you ever find yourself at a Victorian apothecary, don't be surprised if the shelves look less like a pharmacy and more like a cross between a carnival prize booth and a traveling magician's suitcase. Rows of glass bottles, tins, and mysterious packets gleam under the flickering gaslight. Each boasts a hand-lettered label promising nothing less than the total eradication of misery. You're here for a cough, but within seconds you'll be convinced you're about to buy the cure for everything wrong with both your body and your soul. A bell tinkles as you enter. The pharmacist, resplendent in his white apron and eyebrows that defy gravity, greets you with the energy of a man who's been sampling the merchandise. Good morning. What ails you today? Or rather, what doesn't? He gestures grandly to a shelf of elixirs with names like Dr. Benson's celebrated compound, Mariani wine, and Mrs. Pepper's patent nerve drops. Each one claims to be a marvel of modern science, perfected through years of rigorous testing, which is Victorian for let's see what happens. You timidly mention a sore throat. Ah, for that, we have the invincible syrup. And might I also suggest our gentle tonic for toothaches and social distress? The pharmacist plucks a cobalt blue bottle from the shelf and pours a measure into a tiny glass, handing it over as if you've just been invited to join a secret society. It soothes the throat, brightens the mind, and, if you're attending a dinner party, grants remarkable confidence. He leans in conspiratorially. A single teaspoon can transform even the shyest wallflower into the life of the drawing room. 2 teaspoons, and you'll be leading the conga line, whether or not one has been started. You take a cautious sip. The flavor is an unholy alliance of syrupy sweetness, medicinal bitterness, and a faint metallic note that might be mercury or possibly just wishful thinking. But within moments, the effect is unmistakable. Your throat is numb, your teeth have stopped aching, and you're suddenly quite certain you could deliver an impromptu speech on the glories of steam-powered transportation. Is this relief? Or is it just the placebo effect running at full Victorian speed? Either way, you find yourself reaching for the bottle again. Around you, customers collect their own solutions for modern woes. One woman requests something for female maladies and is handed an elixir so potent it claims to regulate moods, clear up skin, and encourage romantic proposals within a fortnight. A nervous-looking gentleman buys a remedy for gentleman's anxiety. Advertised as containing a blend of rare roots, imported spices, and a generous measure of pharmaceutical encouragement. A mother requests syrup for her toddler's persistent cough and receives a bottle that promises quiet nights, sound sleep, and possibly a sudden interest in algebra. The beauty of these elixirs is their ambition. Why settle for curing a cough when you can also cure heartbreak, fatigue, and being shy at parties? Why, just last week, the pharmacist boasts, a customer returned to say our elixir cured his stage fright so thoroughly he joined a circus. He's now the human cannonball, The nerve drops are excellent for altitude. Of course, nobody seems especially interested in the ingredients list. If you ask, the pharmacist might recite something like herbs, spices, exotic barks, trace elements, a whisper of coca leaf, and a touch of French wine for color. The truth is that each bottle contains a small pharmacy's worth of stimulants and narcotics. But that's all part of the charm. It's not about reading labels. It's about believing that the next bottle, the next teaspoon, will finally be the cure for your mysterious modern malaise. As you step back out into the street, elixir in hand, your aches and worries already feel lighter, or at least more entertaining. In Victorian England, everything has a cure. And the cure comes in a bottle that's always half full. And, for the next hour or so are you. Victorian childhood is an adventure in risk management. And nowhere is this clearer than at bedtime. As evening settles over your lamplit parlour, the grown-ups gather with a look of mild panic. How to get the children to sleep, or, failing that, how to stop them from climbing the drapes and starting a small domestic uprising. The answer, as always in the Victorian era, is medicine, by which we mean anything in a bottle, especially if it's labelled soothing syrup, in flowing script and carries the faint, thrilling whiff of danger. You're a child in 1880. You're supposed to be winding down, but your entire body is a bundle of unchecked energy and questionable nutritional choices. You've spent all afternoon eating bread, jam, and whatever else was left unguarded on the kitchen table. Now, as the clock strikes 8, you're told to put on your flannel nightshirt and brush your teeth with a chalky powder that promises both whitening and painless removal of baby teeth, a phrase that's never explained but always unsettling. The real ritual begins when the medicine cabinet opens. Out comes the bottle of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, a household staple found in nurseries from Whitechapel to Westminster. The syrup promises miracles, quiet children, restful nights, and parents who don't collapse from exhaustion before sunrise. What the label doesn't advertise, at least not in large print, is the magical combination of morphine, alcohol, and occasionally a splash of cocaine. The first teaspoon is administered with ceremony, the bottle held aloft like a chalice at a particularly desperate mass. The taste is cloying, floral, and oddly numbing. You grimace, but a few minutes later, your limbs start to feel like overcooked noodles, and your complaints about bedtime drift away. Your parents watch anxiously for signs that the syrup is taking effect. Modern parents might read bedtime stories or play gentle lullabies. Not so in Victorian England. Here, the bedtime story is a brisk warning about highwaymen, wolves, or the importance of finishing your turnips, all delivered in a tone that suggests compliance is a matter of personal safety. If you're lucky, you might get a pat on the head and an extra blanket. If you're not, you get another teaspoon of syrup. The house grows quiet. But it's not the peaceful silence of slumber. It's the tense, hopeful stillness of adults waiting to see if their bold experiment will work. Sometimes it does, and the children drift off to a dreamless sleep, snoring softly as the city's gas lights flicker outside. Other nights, the result is less predictable. Some children become philosophers, suddenly interested in explaining the universe at top volume. Others decide that this is the perfect moment for shadow puppets, wrestling matches, or highly questionable acrobatics on the bed frame. The parents, meanwhile, are trapped in a cycle of hope and dread. The apothecary assures them the syrup is safe, used by millions of grateful mothers, the ads proclaim. What no one mentions is that Victorian medical science is roughly as advanced as a dartboard with Latin labels. If the syrup doesn't work, there are always other options. Children's cordial, nerve drops for the young, or even a spoonful of gin if things get truly desperate. The goal is not so much health as survival, everyone making it through the night with their nerves and their curtains intact. As dawn breaks, the effects wear off. You wake with a vague sense that something strange happened in the night. But you're already thinking about breakfast and another day of high-energy chaos. The adults are pale but grateful, certain that the miracle of Victorian children's medicine has saved them once again, at least until tonight, when bedtime returns, and with it, the bottle. Because in the Victorian home, bedtime isn't the end of the day. It's just the start of another experiment in medical optimism. Nothing, says Victorian authenticity, quite like a relentless, throbbing toothache. It's the universal equalizer. Lords, ladies, chimney sweeps, and schoolchildren all united by the agony of molars gone rogue. The good news? In this age of innovation, you are never more than a short carriage ride or a brisk, desperate walk clutching your jaw away from a remedy. The bad news? That remedy is usually found in a bottle labeled with a cheerful, hand-drawn font and a skull in the corner. You wake in the middle of the night, jaw pulsing in time with your heartbeat. Your bed is lumpy. Your pillow is stuffed with horsehair and ambition, and your only real hope for relief is the small wooden box on the dresser, the family medicine chest. Inside is a dazzling array of tiny glass vials. Dr. Tibbitt's instant relief elixir, soothing gumdrops, and the infamous cocaine solution for dental discomfort, recommended for children, adults, and the generally unlucky. You fumble for a match, squinting in the candlelight as you consult the instructions, which are less medical advice and more choose-your-own-adventure. Apply liberally to the affected area, one label suggests. Do not exceed 3 spoonfuls, warns another, unless you wish to experience unpleasant vividness. With a trembling hand, you dab a generous amount of the cocaine tincture on your aching tooth, bracing for either blessed relief or a trip to the astral plane. Within seconds, your gums go gloriously numb. The pain evaporates, replaced by a tingling sensation that creeps up your cheek and settles somewhere behind your left eye. You breathe a sigh of relief and consider sending a thank you note to whoever first thought to mix medical-grade stimulants with peppermint oil and optimism. In the Victorian era, pain relief isn't just a luxury. It's the reward for surviving the previous round of preventative care, usually a toothbrush made of boar bristles and regret. By morning, the ache is lurking in the background, but you are emboldened. You trudge to the dentist, a man with the demeanor of a hangman and the hands of a butcher. His office smells like carbolic acid, cloves, and lingering terror. The waiting room is packed, everyone clutching a cheek and avoiding eye contact. The dentist greets you with a smile, a dazzling display of his own. Suspiciously white and possibly not entirely natural. He asks about your pain, nods sympathetically, and reaches for his tools. A rusty forceps, a foot-powered drill, and of course, a bottle of his favorite cocaine solution. The examination is quick, clinical, and only mildly traumatic. The dentist dabs more tincture onto your gums, humming a little tune as your whole mouth goes blissfully numb. Marvelous stuff, he remarks. Truly a gift from the gods of chemistry. He recommends you keep the bottle handy, just in case you need to perform your own emergency dentistry, or, as was not uncommon, to deal with the emotional fallout of having survived another Victorian medical procedure. On your way out, you pass a shelf lined with more remedies, tooth powders, nerve drops, and a mysterious jar labeled opium lozenges for delicate mouths. Children and adults alike purchase them with no questions asked. Pain, after all, is inevitable. Numbness is aspirational. You tuck your little bottle into your coat pocket, feeling oddly triumphant. Back home, you practice your smile in the mirror. Your lips barely move, and your cheeks are suspiciously still, but you look almost serene, at least by Victorian standards. Toothaches may be a fact of life, but thanks to a century's worth of ambitious chemistry, you can face them with a numb grin and the certainty that, if all else fails, there's always another tincture waiting on the shelf. In the grand tradition of the Victorian era, You're not just smiling through the pain, you're doing it with style, questionable judgment, and just a hint of peppermint cocaine. The Victorian spring is a riot of green, ivy climbing brick walls, horse chestnut trees erupting into bloom, and every flower bed threatening to turn the city into a fever dream of colour and pollen. But as London shakes off the winter gloom, you are not celebrating. You are sniffling. You are sneezing. Your eyes water with the desperate energy of a broken fountain. In an age before allergy shots and non-drowsy antihistamines, hay fever is not a seasonal inconvenience, it's a personal curse. You trudge into your local apothecary, nose red, pockets stuffed with damp handkerchiefs, and a look of misery that suggests you've spent the night wrestling an angry badger. The pharmacist greets you with a knowing nod. "Ah, the springtime affliction," he declares. "You need something a bit more robust than rosewater and optimism." He sweeps a row of brightly labelled jars forward and taps one with a flourish. "Cocaine snuff, my dear sufferer, the very latest in scientific advances. Breathe deep and banish the pollen blues." You blink, uncertain you've heard correctly. But he's already unscrewing the lid and offering you a pinch of fine, white powder. The instructions are simple. Place a small amount on the back of your hand, lean forward and inhale sharply. There's a moment of uncertainty, a fleeting sense that perhaps you should have just moved to the seaside, like everyone else who can afford to flee pollen season. But then the powder hits your nasal passages and, for a brief, glorious instant, your entire face goes numb. It's not exactly relief. It's something stranger. A total evacuation of sensation from the bridge of your nose to the tip of your eyebrows. The burning itch that's haunted you for days is replaced by a cold, clinical emptiness, as if your nostrils have been replaced with two tiny marble statues. You can breathe again, in a manner of speaking. The pharmacist beams. Marvellous, isn't it? Clears the head, brightens the mind, and leaves no trace of those unsightly sniffles. I recommend a dose with every meal, or whenever you feel yourself losing faith in spring. You are sent home with a small, corked jar labelled Dr. Wilmington's Nasal Invigorator for hay fever, catarrh, and general malaise. The instructions are beautifully vague, advising only that you sniff as needed for best results. For the rest of the day, you wander through the streets of London in a kind of euphoric daze. The world seems sharper, brighter, and considerably less itchy. Even the infamous city odours, a mixture of horse, coal smoke, and last week's fish, can't penetrate your numbed nasal fortress. At home, your family is impressed by your sudden lack of sneezing. Your spouse suggests, only half joking, that perhaps you can now mow the lawn without weeping uncontrollably. You line up your remedies, the nasal snuff, a jar of mentholated salve, and, as a backup, a handkerchief soaked in vinegar, just in case. Hay fever, once your sworn enemy, seems finally, temporarily defeated. Of course, nothing in the Victorian medicine cabinet comes without a price. By evening, the numbness fades, replaced by a peculiar tingling and an overwhelming desire to alphabetize the pantry. You try to read a book, but your eyes are wide and unblinking, and the plot races by at double speed. When the pollen returns, and it always does, you're ready for round two, your trusty jar in hand. By the end of spring, you are equal parts relieved and slightly concerned. The hay fever hasn't disappeared, but your reaction to it certainly has. Victorian science has provided a solution that doesn't so much solve the problem as distract you from it. Completely, enthusiastically, and with just a hint of pharmaceutical bravado. So the next time the flowers bloom and the sneezing starts, remember, in the age of cocaine snuff, no symptom was too trivial, and no remedy too ambitious. Victorian hay fever was no match for chemistry, at least for a few brisk, blissfully numb hours at a time. Step into the heart of Victorian medicine. the pharmacist's laboratory. Its less sterile medical facility and more eccentric inventor's kitchen, with shelves crowded by glass jars, strange powders, and faded apothecary labels, promising everything from instant rejuvenation to nerve tonic for gentle persons. The air hums with the scents of camphor, peppermint, and a faint undercurrent of panic. There's the constant clink of glass, the hiss of a tiny spirit lamp, and the unshakable sense that the man in charge is conducting a new experiment every afternoon, often with your vital organs as the intended test subjects. The pharmacist himself is a study in controlled chaos. His waistcoat is speckled with mysterious stains, some medicinal, some lunch, and his hair appears to have been styled by static electricity and sleep deprivation. Armed with a brass balance scale and a battered notebook, he approaches his craft with the intense focus of a gold prospector and the improvisational flair of a street magician. Customers wait at the counter, clutching prescriptions that look like cryptic treasure maps and hoping the next mixture brings relief instead of, say, the sudden urge to compose opera. Behind the counter, the pharmacy is a stage for 1,000 chemical dramas. There are mortars and pestles for grinding roots, funnels for pouring odd-smelling liquids, and enough spoons and pipettes to supply a small tea party. Sometimes the pharmacist measures powders with such precision you'd think he's handling the Queen's own secret formula. Other times, he throws in a little extra, for luck, as if the rules of chemistry are more guidelines than laws. You watch as he prepares a prescription for the woman ahead of you, a cough syrup for her son, age 4. Into the glass bottle go equal parts sugar syrup, licorice extract, and a generous dash of laudanum, followed by a quick shake and a confident nod. Should settle him down for a good night's sleep, he assures her, as if Victorian children are best calmed by a cocktail that would drop a large sheep. Next, a gentleman orders a tonic for manly vigor. The pharmacist surveys his shelves and selects a mysterious amber bottle. He adds a spoonful of coca extract, a sprinkle of quinine, a few drops of something labeled essence of vitality. The result is a vivid blue potion that glows faintly in the sunlight. He corks it, slaps on a label, and gives the man instructions that mostly consist of "don't take more than 1 glass before breakfast, or you'll frighten the horses." Occasionally, a customer brings in their own homegrown recipe. "My mother's cure for neuralgia," they whisper, sliding a scrap of paper across the counter. The pharmacist reads, nods solemnly, and consults a shelf of dubious dried herbs and something that looks suspiciously like ground-up oyster shells. He mixes, shakes, tastes briefly, with a wince, and bottles the lot with the air of a man who believes any solution is better than none at all. At the end of the day, the counters are sticky, the shelves are a little barer, and the pharmacist has handwritten 6 new labels in a script that only he can decipher. Each bottle, jar, and tin leaves the shop carrying a little piece of his hope that the contents will ease pain, lift spirits, or at the very least, provide a story to tell at dinner. You leave the laboratory clutching your own brown paper parcel, uncertain whether you're holding a cure, a placebo, or a small chemical revolution. In the world of Victorian pharmacy, every visit is an adventure in mixing, measuring, and just a touch of mild chaos. And, of course, you'll be back, if not for the medicine, then for the spectacle of seeing science and optimism blend together. One unpredictable spoonful at a time. If you were ever lucky, or unlucky, enough to need a Victorian house call, you would know the most exciting moment arrives not when the doctor knocks, but when he opens his bag. This bag is legendary. It's not just a medical kit, it's a mobile cabinet of wonders, a suitcase of salvation and mild terror, packed with more glass bottles, metal gadgets, and unidentifiable vials than a magician's prop chest at a children's birthday party. The doctor enters, nods gravely, and drops the bag on the table with a thud heavy enough to frighten both the patient and the family cat. You sit quietly, trying not to look as anxious as you feel. The doctor, his beard immaculate, his eyes twinkling with the knowledge of 7 years university and exactly 0 working thermometers, flicks open the brass clasps. There's a theatrical pause. The room holds its breath. Then, with a practiced flourish, he begins his demonstration. First out is the stethoscope, more decorative than diagnostic, its tubing cracked and faintly smelling of camphor. He loops it around his neck and gives you a confident wink. Next comes the thermometer, long and thin and not quite as clean as you might hope, followed by a gleaming metal syringe in a velvet pouch, just in case anyone needs an invigorating injection. For those who flinch at needles, don't worry. There are powders to sprinkle, tonics to sip, lozenges to suck, and even a jar labeled volatile salts for fainting and general delicacy. And then come the bottles, each with a more outlandish label than the last. There's tincture of opium for nighttime troubles, ether for troublesome coughs, cocaine solution for fatigue and facial pain, and spirit of ammonia just because. There's a little box of leeches. Never leave home without them, he jokes, waggling his eyebrows. And a roll of bandages stiff with age and optimism. Every item is carefully displayed, as if the mere sight of them might make you reconsider being sick in the first place. There's a bottle of castor oil, useful for everything from stomach aches to cleaning bicycle chains, and a pouch of powdered rhubarb for those who prefer their medicine to double as a dessert topping. For the truly desperate, there are mustard plasters, applied to the chest with the promise of drawing out the bad humours, or at least replacing your cold with a more exciting case of second-degree burns. The doctor surveys your pale face and, after a brief round of prodding and tongue inspection, selects a small brown bottle. Take a drop of this every hour, he instructs. If you feel worse, switch to this one. If you start to see colours, perhaps stop altogether. You nod obediently, clutching the bottles like talismans. Family members whisper their own complaints, nerves, nightmares, marital disappointment, and the doctor consults his collection for a suitable solution. There's something for everyone. Elixirs for indigestion, powders for melancholy, tonics for female complaint, and a tiny tin of ointment so pungent it clears the sinuses of the entire household with a single whiff. The bag itself seems bottomless. By the end of the visit, half its contents have been distributed, the doctor's pockets are lighter, and you are loaded up with enough substances to either cure or forget whatever was wrong in the first place. Instructions are vague. Take this with food, or without food, or possibly while standing on one leg, depending on which school of medicine the doctor remembers today. When he snaps the bag shut and tips his hat, you feel both reassured and slightly apprehensive. The doctor departs, his bag swinging like a talisman against the unknown. You're left with your assortment of cures, some hope, and the realization that in Victorian medicine, half the magic lies in the ritual, and the other half is in the bag. It's a truth universally acknowledged in Victorian society that if you are unwell, no matter how or why, you must be suffering from your nerves, or possibly hysteria. These two diagnoses are the bread and butter of 19th century medicine, invoked with equal confidence for headaches, digestive upsets, a tendency to worry about the weather, or the sudden urge to throw your husband's hat out the window. If you're especially unlucky, you get both at once, an impressive achievement usually rewarded with an urgent prescription for the rest cure. You wake up one morning convinced that your heart is fluttering, your energy is waning, and your appetite for boiled mutton is at an all-time low. You mention this to your doctor, who listens gravely, then announces that your symptoms are textbook, nervous exhaustion. If you're a woman, he adds, hysteria for good measure, referencing a medical theory as old as time and just as unprovable. No matter your age or station, the treatment is the same. You are to go immediately to bed and stay there. The rest cure is Victorian medicine's answer to every emotional and physical disturbance. Feeling sad? Bed? Anxious? Bed? Haven't smiled since the Crimean War? Bed, with the curtains drawn and all books, visitors and excitement strictly forbidden. The instructions are uncompromising. You must do nothing, think nothing, and, if at all possible, be nothing until further notice. You are swaddled in heavy blankets, tucked into a feather mattress, and left alone except for your daily meal, bland, overcooked, and generally damp. If you're truly privileged, your only entertainment is the faint tick of the mantel clock and the occasional glimpse of your own reflection, growing paler and more translucent by the day. Your doctor checks in each morning, measuring your pulse with the same solemnity reserved for reading the will, then pronounces you still delicate and prescribes yet another day of therapeutic inertia. For some patients, the rest cure is an introvert's dream. No visitors, no social obligations, and absolutely no expectation to make witty conversation about the latest scandal in the penny press. For others, especially those who thrive on activity, it's less a cure and more an elegant form of torture. As the days blur together, you begin to wonder if you're actually getting better or simply perfecting the art of becoming furniture. Of course, the rest cure isn't just about lying motionless. There are occasional treatments, gentle massages with oils, cold compresses on the forehead, and, naturally, doses of invigorating tonics at strictly regulated intervals. Your medicine cabinet overflows with bottles labeled nerve tonic, elixir of calm, and cocaine wine for ladies' complaint. Each one is to be taken with a reverent hope that this, finally, will settle your wayward spirits and restore you to full Victorian health. Hysteria, meanwhile, is diagnosed so freely that you start to suspect it might just mean having emotions in public. Women are particularly at risk, but men aren't immune, especially those in professions that involve too much reading, too little sunlight, or a pronounced fear of railway timetables. The cure, regardless of gender, is always a retreat from the world, enforced with the gentle tyranny of white linen sheets and well-meaning relatives who whisper in the hallway. By the time you are finally released from your therapeutic exile, you're not entirely sure what was wrong in the first place, but you are well rested, slightly paler, and thoroughly convinced that, in the Victorian era, doing nothing is often the prescription for everything. You rise from your bed, swaddled in new anxieties about rejoining the chaos of daily life, but quietly grateful that, for a little while, your only duty was to be fragile, delicate, and, above all, very, very restful. In Victorian England, medicine is not confined to the polished, glass-fronted pharmacy or the intimidating, fern-laden doctor's office. No, some of the most memorable medical adventures happen right at home, where every kitchen doubles as a laboratory. Every sideboard conceals a bottle or two of universal elixir, and every family has at least one relative determined to heal the sick with a reckless combination of curiosity, thrift, and whatever's left in the spice cabinet. You've been coughing for days, or maybe it's a fever, or just an overwhelming sense of existential dread, all officially recognized ailments in the era. The doctor has been summoned for a house call, and the household prepares with the solemnity of a royal inspection. The best china is brought out. Any evidence of last night's argument about who finished the brandy is hastily tidied away. Most importantly, the family's collection of home remedies is discreetly displayed on the kitchen table, just in case the doctor is late, or, as is often the case, underwhelming. The collection is impressive. There are bottles of laudanum, a sticky jar of lung balsam, a mysterious powder labeled for emergencies only, and a tin of liver pills that promise to banish not only liver complaints but also shyness, boredom, and possibly a lack of ambition. There's an old apothecary's recipe book, its pages stained with generations of hope and spilled gin, open to a page that suggests boiling turnip tops for rheumatism and applying mustard poultices for everything else. You hear the rattle of wheels outside and the doctor arrives, bustling in with his legendary bag, boots muddy and mustache freshly waxed. He surveys the sick room like a general entering a contested fortress. But before he can even open his medical bag, Aunt Millicent is already offering her latest concoction. A medicinal cordial she insists is guaranteed to bring colour back to the cheeks. The doctor eyes the glass suspiciously, but, in the spirit of professional courtesy, takes a polite sip. His right eyebrow twitches, and he quietly deposits the rest in a nearby plant. The examination begins. The doctor taps your chest, listens to your cough, and pronounces that you are suffering from a chill on the lungs, brought on by overexertion or possibly poor moral fibre. He prescribes a course of rest, a daily tonic of his own devising. Main ingredient, alcohol, and, if all else fails, a seaside holiday, by far the most popular prescription of the era, though not one covered by the average peasant's health insurance. While the doctor is distracted by your grandmother's complaints of wandering pains, the rest of the family gets busy with their own interventions. Someone brews a vile-smelling tea out of dandelion root and licorice. The housemaid reappears with a steaming poultice she's been heating on the stove. Its ingredients, a closely guarded secret that probably involves at least one garden weed and a hint of desperation. Your uncle suggests a mustard foot bath, and a neighbour, who once read a pamphlet about electricity, offers to bring over a galvanic device that allegedly cured his cousin's cat. By the end of the day, you have been dosed, poulticed, rubbed, and nearly electrocuted in the name of health. The kitchen smells like a cross between a bakery and a witch's den. The doctor, now well-fed and slightly tipsy from his own brandy-laced elixir, promises to check in tomorrow and reminds you to avoid drafts, loud noises, and excessive reading. You collapse into bed, swaddled in a dozen competing cures, wondering whether you'll wake up restored or simply more interestingly ill. But that's the magic of the Victorian home remedy. It may not cure you, but it will give the entire household a sense of purpose, a topic for gossip, and an excuse to break out the good bottle. In the grand tradition of DIY medicine, healing is as much about hope, ritual, and a dash of chaos as it is about science. And in the Victorian household, that's often exactly what the doctor ordered. In the grand tradition of Victorian parenting, nothing says I care quite like a well-stocked nursery shelf. There's the silver rattle, the lacy christening gown, the book of cautionary tales about children who disobeyed, and, nestled discreetly beside the castor oil, a tiny glass bottle labelled cocaine tooth drops, for teething, toothaches, and general fussiness. Yes, in an age before pediatricians and FDA warnings, the solution to a fretful child was as simple as a few drops of liquid bravado applied straight to the gums. If you're a Victorian child, your teeth are either erupting with dramatic flair or falling out in a cloud of questionable dental hygiene. The process is noisy, sticky, and prone to alarming side effects, such as sudden shrieking, gnawing on the furniture, and a general refusal to nap. Parents, faced with the unending ordeal of teething, are willing to try almost anything. Enter the miracle cure, cocaine tooth drops, advertised as harmless, instantaneous, and universally beloved by infants and caregivers alike. The application is a ritual all its own. A parent dabs a drop or two onto a scrap of linen, or, for the truly daring, their own fingertip. They approach their tiny patient with the wary confidence of someone handling live explosives. The child opens wide, sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes out of protest, and the drop is swiftly administered. The effect is immediate and unmistakable. Gums go blissfully numb, cries subside, and a sense of serene detachment settles over the child, who is now more interested in staring at the wallpaper than in expressing pain. The advertisements promise miracles. "No more tears," proclaims one. "A boon for mothers and nurses," exclaims another, alongside a picture of a cherubic baby sleeping soundly while a well-rested mother reads a novel by the fire. The fine print, if there is any, might mention something about occasional mild stimulation, but most parents are too grateful for a moment's peace to read past the headlines. Of course, the child is not the only beneficiary. Victorian parents, stretched to the breaking point by restless nights and days spent soothing cranky infants, begin to rely on tooth drops for other purposes. A skinned knee? Numb it. A quarrel between siblings? A drop for each, just to be safe. A surprise visit from the in-laws? Suddenly, everyone's gums are tingling with manufactured tranquility. It's not long before older children, savvy to the ways of the nursery, begin to request tooth drops for pretend aches, learning early the value of chemical negotiation. Even the family dog is not immune. If Rover yelps in the night or shows signs of distemper, there's a bottle on hand for four-legged emergencies. In fact, so widespread is the use of cocaine tooth drops that local chemists keep the shelves well stocked, ordering by the crate and occasionally offering discounts for repeat customers. 3 for a shilling, chirps the sign in the window, as if advertising peppermint humbugs. Not all is perfect in the land of numbed gums and blissful silence. Some parents notice their children are, shall we say, unusually energetic after a second or third dose. The baby who once wailed at bedtime now spends the evening rearranging the contents of the toy box and reciting nursery rhymes at double speed. But in an age where the alternative is hours of uninterrupted teething drama, a bit of midnight enthusiasm seems a small price to pay. As the lights dim and the household drifts towards sleep, the nursery is peaceful at last. The bottle is tucked away until the next emergency. A loose tooth, a stubbed toe, a surprise bout of nervousness. In Victorian England, the answer to most childhood woes is simple. If it hurts, numb it. If it's loud, hush it. If you're tired, trust in the curious power of a few miraculous drops. And tomorrow, everyone's teeth, if not their circadian rhythms, will be just a little bit stronger. In Victorian England, the greatest scientific minds were not always found in laboratories or lecture halls. Sometimes they worked at a printing press with a vivid imagination and a bucket of printer's ink, inventing miracles on paper. If you glance at any lamppost, shop window, or newspaper, you'll find yourself bombarded by a barrage of patent medicine advertisements, each bolder, brasher, and more grandiose than the last. Here, the art of healing is matched only by the art of persuasion. Patent medicines are everywhere. Dr. Smith's instant vitality, Mother Florey's universal elixir, Professor Barnaby's marvelous tonic for man and beast. The names alone promise miracles. The claims, naturally, go even further. It's hard not to pause at an illustrated poster showing a sullen, wan Victorian child transformed, thanks to a few doses of elixir of life, into a rosy-cheeked cherub, skipping into the sun while angels, and presumably shareholders, rejoice. Step inside a chemist's shop, and you're greeted by shelves loaded with bottles, tins, and powders, all in cheerful colors and fonts so elaborate they might require their own translation guide. Each patent medicine boasts a unique logo and a guarantee that seems legally binding, morally questionable, and scientifically hilarious. Cures all complaints. No more gout, indigestion, or melancholy. A miracle in every bottle. Some remedies advertise their international awards, prizes won at expositions in Paris, Vienna, or the more mysterious Crystal Palace of Good Health, which may or may not have existed outside the imagination of the ad writer. Victorian consumers are not fools, but they are weary, hopeful, and occasionally desperate. So the advertisements promise more than a cure. They offer a chance at transformation, a shortcut to happiness. Never mind that the bottle in your hand contains mostly alcohol, opium, or, if you're especially fortunate, a brisk dash of cocaine. The important thing is that hope, like the label, is included in every dose. The best advertisements feature elaborate testimonials. I was a mere shadow of myself, writes a Mrs. Hetty Braintree of Kent. But after 2 bottles of Professor Fig's nerve wine, I now ride horses and host dinner parties. Testimonials come from every corner of society. Clergymen, mothers, invalids, and occasionally even the family pet. Mr. Fluffykins, reports one ad, once listless, now chases rats with renewed vigor after a daily spoonful of vitalizing syrup. The line between satire and sincerity blurs. Even skeptics find themselves quietly impressed. Perhaps the most brilliant stroke is the before and after illustration. Here is a gentleman, slouched and pale, surrounded by the tragic detritus of unwellness, crutches, soup, unread newspapers. Next to him, the after version beams with new teeth, new hair, and new friends, all thanks to a fortnight on Dr. Marvel's restorative elixir. The fine print, if you can spot it through the Baroque calligraphy, might suggest results may vary. But most people are too busy imagining their own miraculous transformation to bother. If you wonder how these products spread so quickly, look no further than the traveling medicine show. No village green is safe from the approach of a brightly painted wagon, music blaring and banners flapping in the wind. A charismatic huckster leaps onto a barrel, dazzling the crowd with tales of sickly children cured, old men made spry, and housewives given fresh reason to smile. Free samples are handed out with a wink and a prayer. Sales are brisk, especially after the miraculous demonstration, usually involving a volunteer, a pinch of baking soda, and a lot of shouting. By nightfall, the posters remain, glowing faintly in the lamplight. Bottles have changed hands, coins have changed pockets, and somewhere in the city, a skeptic reads an ad and quietly wonders, what if? In Victorian England, hope is always for sale, painted, bottled, and advertised in glorious technicolor, one miraculous cure at a time. In the Victorian era, nothing sells a product quite like a famous face, or, even better, a famous hat. If you think modern marketing is obsessed with celebrities, you've clearly never seen what happens when Victorians discover that their favorite elixir is supposedly endorsed by the most powerful people on earth. Royalty, statesmen, military heroes, explorers, and yes, even the Pope, become the unwitting mascots for a bubbling tide of patent medicines. Their portraits gaze serenely from labels and advertisements, bestowing an aura of divine, or at least regal, approval upon whatever is in the bottle. Take, for instance, the case of Vin Mariani, a wine fortified with extract of coca leaf, imported all the way from France. The advertisements are everywhere, and they are glorious. Who wouldn't want to drink what the Queen herself allegedly sips before bedtime, favored by monarchs, endorsed by statesmen, celebrated by the Holy Father himself? The posters proclaim, leaving the average citizen in little doubt that whatever is inside must be pure, blessed magic. One famous advertisement features Pope Leo XIII holding a golden chalice of Vin Mariani and offering a beatific, slightly glassy-eyed smile. Not only did he enjoy the beverage, he reportedly awarded it a special Vatican medal, just in case anyone doubted its sanctity. The logic is irresistible. If the most powerful man in Christendom is sipping coca wine after Vespers, surely it must be safe for your sciatica, your nerves, and your general lack of enthusiasm for midwinter Mondays. Who are you to question divine taste? If it's good enough for the Pope, it's good enough for your Aunt Mildred. Celebrity endorsements don't stop at the church doors. The pamphlets and billboards of Victorian cities are plastered with illustrations of generals and duchesses, opera singers and champion boxers, all extolling the virtues of their chosen remedy. Lord Blatherstone credits his longevity to Dr. Curzon's nerve elixir. Lady Featherstone swears by Mrs. Halberd's cordial for women, guaranteed to restore one's social vigour, the exact meaning of which is best left to the imagination. Even Charles Dickens is rumoured, though never confirmed, to have praised a cough syrup most heartily during a particularly challenging reading tour. What's truly marvelous is how few of these illustrious figures are actually consulted. Letters of thanks are paraphrased, if not outright invented. Her Majesty's physician has requested a second bottle, an ad might say, neglecting to mention that the request was actually from a clerk with a persistent case of hay fever. In some cases, the endorsement is nothing more than a polite acknowledgement of a free sample. Never mind. Once the illustration is in print, the public imagination does the rest. For the truly ambitious brand, international reach is the goal. Posters feature the Shah of Persia, the King of Prussia, and any number of American senators, all allegedly enthusiastic consumers. Vin Mariani alone collects a dazzling list of supposed devotees, writers, scientists, bishops, and at least 3 Nobel Prize winners, 2 of whom haven't even been born yet. As you stand in front of the chemist's window, staring at these endorsements, you find yourself wondering, if it's good enough for the upper crust, surely it's good enough for you. Never mind that your only real brush with royalty is watching the Queen's carriage pass by in the drizzle. With every glowing testimonial, the product seems a little more potent, a little more magical, so you buy the bottle. And as you take your first sip, you imagine yourself in grander company, perhaps raising a glass with the Pope, discussing world affairs with the Queen, or, at the very least, feeling a tiny bit more important as the warmth and the coca leaf spreads through your veins. In Victorian England, a famous face is worth 1,000 testimonials, and if that face comes with a medal from the Vatican, well, bottoms up. In Victorian England, mental health is a bit like the weather, frequently miserable, widely discussed, and entirely misunderstood. If you're feeling anxious, melancholy, or just vaguely out of sorts, you're immediately classified as having nervous trouble. The world is a minefield of new pressures, steam engines, telegrams, daily news, and the existential horror of realizing you're living in the only century with both open sewers and compulsory neckties. You confide to your doctor that you're struggling. Perhaps you haven't slept well, or you keep losing your train of thought, or you burst into tears upon hearing the church bell at the wrong angle. The doctor, ever dignified and twirling his moustache, assures you that your complaints are not only common, but positively fashionable. Nervous conditions, he explains, are the signature ailment of the modern age. You are a sensitive soul, he tells you, and the world is simply too much. There's no stigma, only the slight condescension of being labelled delicate, a word that can mean anything from poetically sad to has opinions about potatoes. The list of nervous afflictions is practically endless. There's neurasthenia, melancholia, moral insanity, acute nostalgia, and the ever-popular brain fever, which appears to strike only the well-read and the recently heartbroken. If you're a woman, the menu expands: hysteria, wandering womb, or seasonal sensitivities. For men, there's overstudy, business anxiety, or the mysterious literary indigestion. The medical journals are thick with advice, ranging from avoid strenuous thought to consume beef tea hourly. Society, meanwhile, takes a keen interest in your mental state. Friends and relatives are quick to offer advice, usually involving brisk walks, cold baths, and copious servings of sherry. Your aunt recommends knitting as a cure for melancholy, though your clumsy attempts result in something that looks more like modern art than a scarf. Gentlemen are encouraged to join a club, play a round of billiards, or take up fencing, preferably with someone less anxious. Ladies are advised to spend time in the garden, surrounded by ferns and, if possible, fewer opinions. Of course, if home remedies fail, you're sent to the local chemist for a selection of mental pick-me-ups. There's coca wine, which promises both spiritual uplift and a delightful numbness of the mouth. There are nerve tonics, invigorating powders, and lozenges labeled for temporary lowness. The ingredients list reads like a Victorian shopping spree. Alcohol, opium, cocaine, and the occasional whiff of ammonia for dramatic effect. For more serious cases, the rest cure is prescribed. Weeks or months in bed, forbidden from books, letters, or even lively conversation. Your only task is to lie motionless and hope your brain resets itself like a stubborn clock. Meanwhile, the household operates in whispers, relatives tiptoe past your door, and you're brought an endless supply of bland food, reassuring tonics, and gentle reminders to think pleasant thoughts. Sometimes, this treatment works. More often, it results in boredom so acute you begin to hallucinate conversations with the wallpaper. The unlucky few are sent to private asylums, those grand houses on the outskirts of town where the nervous and the troubled are sequestered for their own good. Here, you're assigned a regimen of routine, fresh air, and the occasional leeching, just to keep your humours in check. The goal is always the same: calm the nerves, restore order, and produce a model citizen, preferably one who no longer cries at inopportune moments. Yet through it all, Victorians keep up appearances. You may be unravelling inside, but as long as your waistcoat is buttoned and your hat is on straight, the world assumes you're perfectly fine. In an age obsessed with progress, mental health is both parade and performance. So you keep marching, nerves and all, down the foggy street, one brisk walk, one nerve tonic, and one polite breakdown at a time. Evenings in Victorian England are a curious spectacle, equal parts social manoeuvring, subtle flexing, and desperate attempts to stave off existential dread. The parlour is where reputations are made, romances are plotted, and, thanks to the pharmaceutical wonders of the age, everyone is suspiciously energetic for people who just spent 12 hours in a fog-damp city. If you've ever wondered why the Victorians wrote so many letters, danced so many reels, and composed so many poems about feeling invigorated, look no further than what's lurking in the punch bowl. You arrive at the home of your hostess, Mrs. Pemberton, with your hair neatly arranged and your nerves humming at a polite, steady tempo. The parlour is a flurry of activity. Candles flicker, gas lamps hiss, and the air is a fragrant haze of rosewater, coal smoke, and whatever mysterious substance the butler is polishing the silver with. There is laughter, the clink of glasses, and a faint undertone of competitive coughing. Refreshments are served, and the selection is both impressive and highly questionable. There's tea, properly strong, enough to make your toes curl. There are little cakes and sandwiches with the crusts neatly trimmed. And then, at the heart of the sideboard, sits a selection of bottles that have made the rounds at every gathering in town. Mariani wine, Coca tonic, and the infamous invigorating cordial, poured freely into teacups with a sly wink. The labels promise energy, confidence, and a willingness to recite epic poetry at a moment's notice. After one glass, you find yourself discussing the finer points of Greek mythology with Mr. Chilton, who usually speaks only in grunts. 2 glasses in, Mrs. Pemberton's shy niece is regaling the group with her impressions of notable members of Parliament. A third, and someone's grandmother is attempting a handstand in the corner to polite applause. The conversational tempo quickens. The jokes get sharper. Even the dog is suspiciously alert, ears twitching at every syllable. The energy in the room is not just social, it's chemical. Everyone is just a little too chatty, a little too confident, and a little too quick to offer unsolicited advice on matters of plumbing or poetry. Parlour games become epic competitions. Charades with interpretive dance, poetry slams before the term exists, impromptu debates on the relative merits of cod liver oil versus cocaine for the common cold. The mood is buoyant, almost giddy, a carnival of ideas and mild illusions of grandeur. Your own heart is racing, your cheeks are flushed, and you're suddenly convinced that your destiny lies in writing a 4-volume memoir, possibly tonight. The music gets louder. Someone brings out a deck of cards. There are rumours of a midnight supper, followed by more toasts and inevitably more tonic. Time seems elastic. 1 minute it's 8 o'clock, the next it's nearly 2 in the morning, and you're deep in a debate about whether Queen Victoria ever really smiled. But beneath all the laughter and bravado, there's a gentle sense of camaraderie. These are your friends, your rivals, your extended family of eccentric Victorians, all kept upright and talking by a steady drip of pharmaceutical enthusiasm. When the clock finally strikes the hour of common sense, you step out into the cold, clear air, your ears ringing with laughter and your mind buzzing with plans for next time. As you walk home, you wonder if you will sleep at all, or if you'll lie awake, replaying conversations and inventing a few new ones for good measure. In the social scene of Victorian England, being coked up and conversational isn't a scandal. It's the only way to keep up. So, next time you raise a glass in the parlour, toast to your nerves, your friends, and the mysterious courage that comes in a bottle. Good for at least one unforgettable evening, and perhaps a poem or two by sunrise. If you want to understand the wild optimism of Victorian medicine, there's no better place to start than the era's public lecture circuit. Long before PowerPoint and TED Talks, the city's finest minds and most enthusiastic salesmen toured the country, drawing crowds with promises of discovery, spectacle, and sometimes a miracle in a bottle. The lecture hall, whether in a grand theatre or the back room of a smoky tavern, is where science meets showmanship, where the line between medical genius and cheerful charlatan blurs into a fine Victorian fog. Tonight, you find yourself wedged onto a wooden bench in a crowded auditorium, shoulder to shoulder with people in every stage of health and skepticism. The air is thick with anticipation and the scent of boiled wool, cheap cigars, and faintly medicinal liniment. The gentleman beside you is muttering about electromagnetism, while his wife clutches a pamphlet touting Dr. Abernathy's elixir of life. You study the stage, where a large chalkboard, a table full of glassware, and a suspiciously well-groomed assistant are ready for action. The evening's main event is Dr. Phineas T. Spooner, a man whose moustache is as magnificent as his credentials are mysterious. He strides on stage to a round of applause, bows grandly, and launches into a rhapsody about the marvels of modern science. Tonight's topic? The exciting new frontier of cocaine therapy, complete with live demonstrations and, allegedly, a dramatic reading from Pliny the Elder. Dr. Spooner begins by dazzling the crowd with a brief history of medicinal marvels. He references Galen and Hippocrates, but quickly pivots to the Victorians' own favourite, cocaine, described as the modern Prometheus. He holds up a vial to admiring gasps. With this substance, ladies and gentlemen, the boundaries of pain, fatigue, and social awkwardness are forever vanquished. He dabs a little on his own gums, grins widely, and assures the audience he feels absolutely splendid. The assistant, notebook at the ready, confirms his pulse is robust. The lecture isn't just talk, it's theatre. Dr. Spooner invites a volunteer, a rather nervous bank clerk, to the stage. The experiment? Curing stage fright with a tiny dose of cocaine solution. The clerk takes a sip, blinks twice, and proceeds to deliver an impromptu speech about corn tariffs with such confidence that even his wife is briefly impressed. The audience applauds wildly. "Science," shouts Dr. Spooner, "the path to progress." Between experiments, Spooner fields questions from the floor. One gentleman inquires about the substance's effects on marital tranquility. Spooner responds with a joke about his mother-in-law, then segues into selling packets of his patented tonic for a modest fee. Another attendee wants to know if it's suitable for pets. The answer is, reassuringly, absolutely, though perhaps not for goldfish. Of course, not every lecture is this convincing. Some speakers hawk cures for baldness, methods for height enhancement, or magnetized water that promises to ward off gout and in-laws. The line between visionaries and quacks is razor thin, and sometimes the only difference is the size of the crowd or the hat. There are tales of physicians demonstrating bloodletting techniques on stage, Fainting is common, applause is not, and of medical mesmerists, putting volunteers to sleep with a pendulum and a monologue about phrenology. But for all the hucksterism, the lecture circuit is where Victorians encounter new ideas, some brilliant, some bizarre, and many both. You leave the hall buzzing with possibility, a pamphlet in your hand and a free sample in your pocket. Whether you believe the hype or not, you can't help but feel you've glimpsed the future, a future where science, spectacle, and hope travel together in a cloud of chalk dust and chemical bravado. In the end, whether you buy the tonic or just the story, you're part of the show. And in Victorian England, that's often the best medicine of all. It's the middle of the night in Victorian England. The lamps are dim, the fire is low, and you, like so many others, are wide awake. Why? Because your body, currently operating with the nervous energy of a startled racehorse, is processing more stimulants than a Parisian cafe on Bastille Day. Sleep, that ancient comfort, has been banished by a parade of patent medicines, tonics, invigorators, and the unshakable optimism of every doctor who ever said, "Don't worry, it's perfectly safe." Earlier that evening, everything seemed promising. You took your nerve drops before dinner, just a dash, to help with conversation. You sampled a bit of invigorating cordial at Mrs. Featherstone's social gathering because everyone else was doing it, and you didn't want to seem dull. You even accepted a spoonful of children's syrup to help your delicate digestion. Never mind that the label featured a cartoon lion with what can only be described as haunted eyes. By bedtime, your heart is thumping, your brain is performing mental acrobatics, and you are suddenly gripped by an overwhelming urge to rearrange your entire wardrobe by color, fabric, and emotional significance. You try reading, but the sentences blur together in a rush of new business ideas and urgent concerns about whether you've ever truly appreciated celery. Counting sheep quickly escalates into mentally naming every sheep, giving them backstories, and pondering their prospects in Victorian society. Sleep remains a distant dream. You are not alone. All across the city, night owls are born, not from a love of poetry or a desire to see the stars, but from the raw, unfiltered consequence of too many Victorian remedies. In the grand houses, lords and ladies pace elaborate hallways, nervously humming waltzes at twice the proper speed. Downstairs, the staff polish silverware that's already clean, write long letters to cousins they've never met, or simply stare into the dark, contemplating the existential nature of the hedgehog. The doctors, of course, are baffled. Restlessness, they call it. A sign of modern progress. The same man who handed you the coca wine in the afternoon now recommends a gentle evening stroll, a glass of port, or perhaps just a slightly larger dose of invigorator before bed. If all else fails, there's always opium, which at least offers the hope of sleep, even if the dreams are a bit avant-garde. The advertisements for these products rarely mention insomnia. In fact, they barely acknowledge side effects at all, unless you count the euphemistic may promote a lively constitution or excellent for those who work late. The testimonials are suspiciously cheerful. After 3 weeks on Dr. Minton's vital elixir, "I no longer require sleep at all," writes one satisfied customer, whose handwriting becomes more erratic in each successive letter. You begin to notice other quirks. The dog refuses to lie down. The family parrot recites the entire shipping forecast at 2 a.m. The garden gnomes seem to have moved. Everyone is alert, twitchy, and just a bit too enthusiastic about morning chores. The city hums with a faint undercurrent of sleepless ambition. Poems written at midnight, novels started and abandoned, new inventions dreamed up and quickly forgotten by breakfast. As dawn finally creeps in, You lie in bed, sheets tangled, eyes wide, composing imaginary letters to Queen Victoria about the urgent need for national nap time. Eventually, sleep does come, fitful, busy, filled with dreams of chasing pocket watches through endless corridors. You wake uncertain whether you've truly rested or simply pressed pause on your waking mind. In Victorian England, side effects are an afterthought, lost in the glittering promise of instant energy and social success. Insomnia is just the price of progress, a small sacrifice for the luxury of staying up all night, worrying productively. And if you're still awake at sunrise, don't worry, there's always another tonic for that. It had to happen eventually. For years, Victorians happily dosed themselves with every invigorator, cordial, and nerve tonic the pharmacy could produce, trusting, as only the truly optimistic can, that anything with a gold-embossed label and a faint medicinal aroma was bound to be good for them. But now, as the century advances and the city's population develops a collective case of the jitters, a new phenomenon emerges. Skepticism. It begins quietly, as most revolutions do. There are whispers in the morning papers, unpleasant after-effects from patent nerve drops. Is Mariani wine too stimulating for infants? Society ladies share worried glances over afternoon tea, recounting stories of sleepless nights, racing hearts, and a sudden, mysterious rise in impromptu house cleaning. The phrase invigorating overdose becomes the latest parlor joke. Even the family dog has developed a nervous tic. Doctors start to take notice, albeit reluctantly. The first signs are subtle. Patients who return for more medicine because they feel strangely worse after every dose. Some admit to vivid dreams featuring talking ferns or competitive vegetable growing. Others simply complain of exhaustion, irritability, or the sudden urge to alphabetize the household silver. The doctors frown, make a note, and, for lack of a better idea, prescribe a milder tonic, preferably one that won't keep the entire household awake until dawn. Newspaper columnists, ever eager for a good panic, seize the story with relish. There are editorials warning of cordial mania, op-eds urging moderation, and cartoons featuring wild-eyed Victorians rearranging their gardens at midnight. The mood shifts from enthusiastic trust to nervous suspicion. Could it be that the miracle cure for melancholy is simply too miraculous? Perhaps. The columnists muse. Life is not meant to be lived at a gallop. Perhaps the best medicine is a warm bath and 8 hours of sleep. Not a bottle of optimism with a cocaine chaser. The backlash spreads to the marketplace. Chemists are suddenly beset by anxious customers requesting something milder, please, or demanding to know if their tonic contains anything more stimulating than ginger. The once booming trade in invigorators slows as people trade stories of friends who haven't blinked in a week, or of that unfortunate incident at the Bishop's garden party when Mrs. Willoughby attempted to teach the vicar's dog to play chess. Even the advertisements change. Gone are the promises of boundless energy and tireless nights. Now, the labels urge moderate use, consult your physician, and, in the case of Dr. Swale's restorative, absolutely no more than 2 glasses before noon. Bottles are quietly reformulated, with the more exciting ingredients swapped out for chamomile, lemon balm, or, when all else fails, plain water and wishful thinking. Still, old habits die hard. Many Victorians remain loyal to their favorite brands, clinging to the hope that the next bottle will finally deliver happiness without insomnia, palpitations, or the need to recite the Latin names of houseplants. But the age of uncritical enthusiasm is waning. Caution, like carbolic soap, has found its place in the Victorian household. And so, as the city's tempo slows by a fraction, and the curtains are drawn a little earlier each night, a new wisdom emerges. Perhaps, just perhaps, not every brightly labelled cure is the answer. Sometimes, all you really need is a cup of weak tea, a sensible bedtime, and the comforting knowledge that your nerves, for once, are your own. Life below stairs in a Victorian household is a world of its own, a relentless ballet of clattering dishes, hurried footsteps, and whispered gossip echoing through stone-floored hallways. While the family upstairs lounges with their tonics and cordials, the staff is equally invested in staying upright, energetic, and, if possible, marginally less exhausted than a coal miner in August. For the servants of England's great houses, stimulants are less a luxury and more a lifeline. You're a housemaid, up before the first glimmer of dawn, your arms already aching from yesterday's marathon dusting session. The butler strides past, mustache bristling, clutching a mug of strong staff tea, brewed thick enough to dissolve a teaspoon. The cook, swaying gently by the stove, doses her morning porridge with a few drops of Mrs. Abernathy's invigorating elixir label promises pep, zest, and reluctant optimism. In the scullery, the youngest footman is spooning energy tonic for gentlefolk and their attendants directly into his mouth, eyes wide and hopeful as the sun rises. There is no time for fatigue. Breakfast must be served, boots polished, fires lit, and the never-ending battle against dust and disorder waged anew. The great myth is that servants are naturally cheerful, energized by duty and the thrill of silently judging their employer's taste in wallpaper. The truth is that most staff are held together by equal parts adrenaline and patent medicine, purchased in brown glass bottles with reassuringly vague instructions. Take as needed. Do not question results. The staff's secret stash lives in a battered cabinet behind the kitchen door. There, bottles line up like a chorus line of questionable hope. Wakeful drops, stamina powder, and doctor. Smoots pick me up for wearied domestics. Some are handed out with a nod from the housekeeper. Others are shared between shifts. A teaspoon here, a swig there, followed by a silent pact to ignore whatever happens next. Mid-morning, the house is a hive of activity. The laundry maid, whose arms are permanently damp, sings softly as she scrubs, voice noticeably more cheerful after a dash of tonic in her tea. The stable boy, cleaning boots with brisk efficiency, seems suspiciously chipper for someone who's been awake since the birds started plotting. Even the stern butler cracks a smile, just once, when he thinks no one is watching. Invigorators, he murmurs to the cook, are the backbone of the household. That and a good pair of shoes. But the dark side of this chemical enthusiasm soon emerges. By afternoon, the footman is jittery. The maid is reorganizing the pantry for the third time, and the cook is seen muttering to the vegetables about their lack of ambition. There are stories, whispered over supper, of servants who've stayed up for 2 days straight, caught alphabetizing the pantry or composing symphonies on the kitchen spoons. No one questions the sudden bursts of productivity or the equally sudden collapses that follow. Still, the ritual continues. When the family requests a midnight snack or an early breakfast for unexpected guests, the staff are ready, wide-eyed, smiling, and perhaps a bit too eager. In a world where energy is currency and exhaustion is not an option, stimulants offer a brief, bubbly escape from the grind. As the lamps are dimmed and the last dish washed, the staff retreat to their tiny quarters. Someone passes around the bottle, one last hopeful sip for the road. In Victorian England, even the quiet heroes of the household need a miracle now and then. And if it comes in a bottle labelled Invigorator, all the better. Sleep is optional. Service, eternal. If you think Victorian childhood is all pinafores, toy boats, and endless innocent play, you're half right. The other half is a blur of wild energy, mysterious illnesses, and a truly astonishing collection of bottles labelled for the young and delicate. Parents, determined to keep their little darlings upright and, ideally, quiet, become connoisseurs of children's medicine. Victorian children are a paradox, bouncing off the walls one moment, then asleep under the sideboard, dreams fueled by enough syrup and tonic to flatten a Shetland pony. A typical Victorian morning begins with a squabble over boots, a reluctant washing with soap that smells of lye and disappointment, and a hearty breakfast of bread, jam, and a spoonful of nerve syrup for growing minds. This syrup, sweet and slightly bitter, claims to improve memory, appetite, and a mysterious quality known only as moral stamina. The ingredients are a closely guarded secret, but the results are clear. By mid-morning, the children are chattering at speeds only bats can hear, and attempting to climb the curtains, the piano, and each other. School is both a challenge and a test of endurance, for pupils and teachers alike. The classroom is a sea of fidgeting children, all with slightly glazed eyes and the eerie energy of puppies on parade. The teacher, fortified by her own educator's elixir, leads a lesson on arithmetic. Some children recite their times tables at lightning speed. Others, unable to sit still, volunteer for every demonstration, no matter how irrelevant. Today we are studying rivers, the teacher announces. 3 children immediately declare themselves tributaries and proceed to weave through the desks. Of course, all this excitement is not sustainable. By lunchtime, the class is slumped over their desks, heads resting on ink-stained arms. The invigorating medicine has worn off. Nap time is as much for the adults as the children. A moment of blessed silence in a day otherwise dominated by shrieking, stomping, and small, unlicensed experiments involving live frogs. Afternoons are a mixed bag. Some children, revived by a post-lunch dose of digestive tonic, resume their mischief, staging impromptu races through the garden or reorganizing the toy cupboard by secret societies. Others, drained from their earlier heroics, can be found napping in unlikely places, under beds, in laundry baskets, or curled up behind the aspidistra. Victorian homes are peppered with these tiny, sleeping figures, briefly at rest before the next round of high-speed chaos. Parents share stories over tea of children who simply never tire, neglecting to mention the bottles of cordial and syrup that lubricate family life. There are jokes about patent medicine babies whose first words are often another spoon, please. Advertisements boast of children who are alert, attentive, and rarely ill, but also admit, in smaller print, that occasional drowsiness is to be expected. As evening approaches, the cycle repeats. Baths, nightshirts, and a final calming draught from a bottle with a picture of a moon and a sleeping lamb. For a while, the house is filled with the lullaby of exhausted, slightly medicated children finally succumbing to sleep. The parents, too, breathe a sigh of relief, knowing they have a few quiet hours before the cycle starts again at dawn. In Victorian England, children may have short attention spans and surprisingly long naps, but thanks to the wonders of modern medicine and a little creative chemistry, childhood is anything but boring. It's a whirligig of energy, a patchwork of naps, and, if you're lucky, just a little bit of peace and quiet for everyone involved. There's a popular theory that the sun never set on the British Empire. What's less commonly discussed is why it never slept, either. Behind every well-pressed uniform, every ambitious railway, and every frantic memorandum from the colonies lurked a quiet secret. Victorian Britain ran, quite literally, on stimulants. From the highest echelons of government to the most sunburned junior clerk in Calcutta, the empire's engine was stoked by coffee, tea, and a dazzling array of medicinal concoctions, none more beloved than those featuring the mighty coca leaf. It starts, as all things imperial do, with a bit of competition. Europe's powers racing for territory, trade, and treasure. British administrators, weary from long days of paperwork and the occasional uprising, look for anything to sharpen their wits and dull their headaches. Enter the stimulant. Early morning, the colonial official downs a mug of tea so strong it could hold up a tent, followed by a discreet dose of fortifying elixir, guaranteed to banish lethargy, improve morale, and promote decisive action in difficult climates. By mid-morning, the effects are obvious. Letters from London are answered in record time. Entire railway systems are planned before lunch, and by afternoon, the office is a blur of stamped papers, ticking clocks, and energetic plotting. The boss hands out coca wine to particularly industrious clerks. Maps are redrawn, meetings convened, and if the odd note is written in suspiciously shaky handwriting, nobody asks questions. Stimulants aren't just for bureaucrats. Explorers, soldiers, and missionaries all carry their own supply of tonics, vials of nerve drops, tins of invigorating lozenges, and packets of powder promising to ward off native fevers, red, boredom and homesickness. In the jungle, in the desert, or at the world's edge, there's always a bottle to pass around the campfire. Tales abound of officers marching for days with nothing but hard biscuits, a canteen of river water, and enough coca extract to tranquilize a horse. If the horse happened to be writing a treatise on parliamentary procedure, back home, the Empire's heartbeat is just as caffeinated. London's gentlemen sip their fortified wine at clubs, exchanging news of the latest conquest, while their wives compare notes on which tonic best supports a busy social calendar. Advertisements proclaim colonial vigor in every bottle. Testimonials flood in from every corner of the map. A governor in Singapore, a botanist in Africa, a judge in India, all promising that a steady dose of cocaine syrup is the difference between glory and going native. Of course, there are side effects. Some administrators become a touch too ambitious, insisting on reorganizing entire provinces before breakfast. Soldiers grow restless, scribbling long letters home about glorious insomnia and the mysterious case of the vanishing supplies. In rare cases, a civil servant attempts to annex a neighboring office, claiming a sudden urge to spread civilization and paperwork. But these incidents are quietly overlooked in favor of productivity. In drawing rooms and barracks, the ritual is the same, a toast to Queen and Empire, followed by a bracing sip of whatever the chemist recommends. The empire expands, the railway grows, and the sun blazes on, powered, for a while, by faith, steel, and just a pinch of pharmaceutical optimism. So the next time you marvel at a map of Victorian conquests, remember, behind every red line was an over-caffeinated, slightly jittery hand. World domination, it turns out, isn't just a matter of destiny. Sometimes, it's simply a matter of never running out of stimulants. In the grand adventure that is Victorian self-medicating, the only thing less popular than moderation is the idea that you might ever want or need to stop. As far as the bustling apothecaries and determined householders of the age are concerned, there's no such thing as too much of a good thing. If you start feeling a bit off after finishing your third bottle of invigorating cordial in as many days, well, that's just your body asking for a new and different tonic. The word withdrawal has yet to make its debut. You awake one morning after a week of robust self-treatment, only to discover that the world seems slower, dimmer, less inspired. Your limbs are heavy, your mood is fragile, and the family complains that your usual enthusiasm for alphabetizing the cutlery drawer has vanished. This is not a recognized medical condition. It is, at best, the blues, a passing weariness, or, if you are particularly unlucky, a touch of the vapors. The answer is simple: take another dose. All around you, similar scenes unfold. A neighbor who once hosted dazzling parties now spends his afternoons gazing mournfully at the wallpaper. A friend who swore by Dr. Gilman's cocoa syrup for his nerves now reports an inability to muster the energy to write letters or organize his shoe collection. Even the family dog, previously possessed of a suspiciously energetic tail, has grown listless and contemplative. The solution is, naturally, more medicine. If your favorite tonic suddenly makes you queasy, simply try another. The world of Victorian remedies is large, colorful, and, above all, endlessly optimistic about your ability to stay one sip ahead of melancholy. Doctors, meanwhile, maintain a certain professional ambiguity. When patients complain of sudden fatigue, irritability, or wild swings between euphoria and gloom, the answer is always a new remedy. You may be overtaxed, they suggest. Try my latest restorative draft, now with extra gentian root and a dash of fortitude. If the new tonic works, the doctor is a genius. If not, well, the patient must be constitutionally unsuited to the brisk pace of modern life. Of course, behind closed doors, some doctors have begun to suspect that all is not well. The journals hint at strange sequelae and after-effects of energetic treatments. A few brave souls quietly suggest that some patients might actually be suffering from the remedies themselves. But these voices are drowned out by the much louder chorus, insisting that, if you're feeling low, you should simply redouble your efforts. Society itself supports this merry-go-round. There are so many alternatives: radium tonic, sarsaparilla elixir, and even electric drops, which promise to jumpstart your spirits when all else fails. Parties, meetings, and family suppers run on a steady stream of just a little something to help you rally. If you do, by chance, stop taking your daily cordial, you might find yourself anxious, sleepless, and prone to fits of existential dread. This, the advertisements assure you, is merely a sign you are adjusting to new vibrancy and will pass after a restorative walk or, better yet, a double dose of whatever's next on the shelf. So you rally. You pour, you sip, you convince yourself that Victorian vigor means never asking how much is too much. In this world, the only true withdrawal is withdrawing to the couch for a nap, preferably after a hearty spoonful of pick-me-up. Moderation is for philosophers. For everyone else, there's always another cure. After all, why stop now? After a night journeying through the wilds of Victorian medicine, you wake up in the modern world, unsure whether you've actually slept or just completed a historical marathon powered by the memory of cocaine tooth drops and invigorating cordials. Your bedside table holds nothing more exotic than ibuprofen and herbal tea. The only thing keeping you up at night is the glow from your phone screen, not a potent syrup designed to make you recite Shakespeare at 2 a.m. The difference is both comical and profound. You reach for a painkiller, check the dosage twice, and marvel that nowhere on the label does it promise to cure heartbreak, social anxiety, and moral lassitude in one go. There's a curious relief in reading may cause drowsiness instead of may cause spontaneous piano recitals or urge to annex a neighboring county. It's a quieter world, and a much more boring one, thank goodness. You make your way to the kitchen. Coffee is your only stimulant, and it comes with a side of mild guilt. Not the risk of hallucinating that the aspidistra is talking back. There are no patent medicines lined up on the shelf, no bright bottles promising vigor, fortitude, and the ability to survive both fog and family reunions. The sugar jar is just sugar. The wine, if you have any, is reassuringly bland and unmedicated. Breakfast is a tranquil affair, no one fighting over the last spoonful of pick-me-up for the young and faint-hearted. There's comfort in the small, modern inconveniences. If you have a cold, the pharmacist gives you a box of tissues and a knowing look, not a mysterious tonic brewed from equal parts hope, morphine, and wishful thinking. Your doctor might be running late, but at least you won't be handed a pamphlet on the benefits of radium baths for nerves. When you worry about insomnia, it's probably the late-night emails, not an accidental overdose of invigorator. Yet, as you reflect, it's impossible not to feel a strange affection for the Victorians and their era of enthusiastic, if ill-informed, optimism. Their medicine cabinets were wild experiments in faith, chemistry, and bravado. They lived in a world where everything, sadness, shyness, even hay fever, was an adventure to be tackled with a bright label and a bracing sip. It's easy to laugh at the absurdity, but it's also a testament to human hopefulness. If nothing else, they believed fiercely in the possibility of a cure for whatever ailed you, even if that cure came with a side of uncontrollable giggling or midnight wallpaper appreciation. Modern life, with all its comforts and sensible regulations, is a kind of quiet luxury. You can choose rest without resorting to laudanum. You can consult your doctor without worrying he'll offer you a solution better suited to cleaning brass. You have the luxury of skepticism, the ease of sleep, and the pleasure of medicine that almost never tries to rewire your personality. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into your calm, stimulant-free bed, sigh in relief. You're living in a world where medicine is boring, and, for once, that's the best news of all. Victorian medicine may have been wild, but looking back with a little laughter and a lot of gratitude, you know you wouldn't trade your boring bottle of ibuprofen for all the invigorators in England. Victorian England is famous for many things: railways, fog, and an insatiable appetite for new medical marvels. But perhaps the most delightfully peculiar remedy to sweep the drawing rooms and sickbeds of the nation was the humble houseplant. That's right. In an age obsessed with ferns and potted palms, your best hope for health might just be hiding in a ceramic pot on the windowsill. It all begins with a mixture of genuine scientific curiosity and a dash of wishful thinking. Physicians and pamphleteers alike declare that the air inside most homes is dangerously depleted, full of miasmas, effluvia, and other invisible assailants. The solution? Plants, preferably as many as can be crammed onto every available surface. Ferns become a particular favorite, praised for their air-purifying abilities and the subtle way they distract guests from the ever-present smell of coal smoke. You are advised, in the interest of your nerves and complexion, to take the air in the fern-filled parlor. The doctor himself recommends daily exposure to fresh green life, insisting that simply gazing at a healthy plant will calm the mind and fortify the spirit. For cases of persistent melancholy, the recommended cure is a stroll through the conservatory, followed by a brisk fanning with a palm frond and perhaps a light dusting of moss water. It's medicine that looks good on a calling card. Every respectable Victorian home boasts a collection of potted wonders. There are aspidistras in corners, palms flanking every doorway, and a veritable army of ferns perched on every flat surface. Some families become downright competitive about their indoor jungles, boasting of rare varieties or the number of days a particular fern has survived the attentions of children, maids, and curious house cats. Plants are prescribed for nearly everything: nervous exhaustion, headaches, foul humors, and the general malaise of modern living. For those confined to bed, a nurse brings in a fresh pot of greenery each morning, placing it on the bedside table with all the gravity of a sacred rite. The patient is encouraged to breathe deeply, admire the fronds, and consider their own resilience. If recovery seems slow, another plant is added. Soon, the sick room resembles a tropical garden and the patient can barely see the ceiling, much less the doctor who occasionally pokes through the undergrowth to check for signs of improvement. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Skeptics point out that ferns don't seem to do much for cholera, and that most cases of restored vigor coincide with the windows being opened for the first time all year. Still, the popularity of the houseplant cure endures, aided by the persuasive power of a well-tended fern and the Victorian determination to find hope in anything green and alive. The advertisements keep pace. Aspidistra, nature's own healer. Palms for peace of mind. There are pamphlets on proper fern care and recipes for compost tea. The apothecary offers discounts for bulk orders, and the local florist enjoys a boom in business every time the weather turns. In the end, it's hard to say whether the houseplant cure is science, superstition, or simply a bit of welcome greenery in a world of brick and soot. But for the weary Victorian, it's a gentle, harmless medicine, one that neither numbs the gums nor keeps you up all night reciting Latin poetry. Sometimes, the best cure is simply a breath of fresh air and the quiet company of a very determined fern. If there's one thing Victorians feared even more than a cold London winter, it was surgery. In an age when even the common cold could be a near-death experience, the idea of letting someone near you with a sore and a strong opinion was enough to make even the bravest soul clutch their prayer book. Yet, with the bold optimism characteristic of the era, Victorians marched bravely into the unknown, armed, as always, with a cocktail of wild medical innovations. Let's set the scene. You're scheduled for minor surgery, a phrase that in Victorian times covers everything from removing a bunion to investigating a mysterious lump you discovered while buttoning your waistcoat. The doctor arrives in a black coat and with a mustache that says, "Trust me, I read half a chapter on this in medical school." His medical bag rattles ominously. Family members gather round, some to hold your hand, others to faint for dramatic effect. Before the advent of anesthesia, surgery meant speed and a high pain threshold. But now, there's chloroform, hailed as the miracle that finally made operations survivable and, in some circles, a bit of a social event. The doctor produces a glass inhaler and soaks a handkerchief with a generous dose. You're instructed to breathe deeply and think of pleasant things. Within seconds, the room wobbles, reality melts, and you wonder if perhaps you'll wake up with an extra finger or two. But chloroform is not the only trick in the Victorian surgeon's kit. For local procedures, cocaine is the new darling of medical science. Numb that obsessed tooth? Cocaine solution. Stitch up a wound? Cocaine spray. The doctor, eyes sparkling with confidence, assures you it's remarkably safe and used by all the best practitioners. You nod, not entirely sure whether you're being treated or recruited for a travelling circus. There is a ritual to Victorian surgery. First, the doctor scrubs his hands, sometimes with soap, more often with strong alcohol or a quick wipe on his trousers. He consults a set of instruments that look more suited to carpentry than medicine. Each blade, clamp, and probe is displayed with a flourish, the crowd of relatives murmuring in awe or horror. The surgeon asks if you have any last requests. You reply, "Just make it quick." The operation itself is mercifully brief. A whiff of chloroform and the world slips away. For minor wounds or dental emergencies, a dab of cocaine numbs the pain and makes you feel, briefly, like you could wrestle a bear and win. When you awaken, groggy but miraculously alive, the doctor assures you that you were a model patient and presents a vial of restorative tonic as a reward for your bravery. The family celebrates your survival with strong tea and nervous laughter. The doctor, job done, pockets his fee and promises to check in if he remembers or if the weather is good. You are left to marvel at your own resilience, occasionally prod your bandages, and thank your lucky stars for chemical progress. Looking back, the courage of the Victorian patient is undeniable. Surgery was never easy, but with a little help from chloroform, cocaine, and a truly terrifying set of instruments, people faced their fears and lived to tell the tale. In the end, perhaps the real miracle cure was simply hope and a good, deep breath. The Victorian ladies' luncheon is, on the surface, a demure affair. A flutter of lace, delicate china, and polite conversation about the weather or the relative merits of rhubarb pie. But beneath the calm exterior, it's a gathering buzzing with medical curiosity, home remedies, and the quiet competition of who's trying the most fashionable cure. If you listen carefully between compliments about bonnets and discreet criticisms of the vicar's sermons, you'll discover a world of elixirs. Digestive tonics, and the occasional eyebrow-raising enema recipe. As you settle onto a tufted settee, balancing a plate of cucumber sandwiches and a cup of tea so strong it could strip paint, the conversation turns, almost inevitably, to health. Have you tried Dr. Doolittle's female fortifier? Asks Mrs. Chumley, producing a tiny bottle from her handbag. It's simply marvelous for one's constitution. The others nod approvingly. Every lady present is, in her own way, an expert in the era's favorite pursuit. Self-improvement through chemistry. A lively debate ensues about the best remedies for nervous complaint and delicate digestion. Mrs. Peabody swears by a morning glass of elixir of gentian and ginger. Miss Hargreaves, whose complexion is the envy of the parish, attributes her glow to a regimen of cod liver oil, a brisk walk, and a restorative enema every Sunday afternoon. You nod, not entirely sure what to say, and make a mental note to avoid Sunday visits. Etiquette dictates that no subject is too taboo, as long as it's approached with a ladylike sense of discretion. The merits of beetroot for the complexion are weighed against the rumoured dangers of too much rhubarb. Recipes for spring tonics are exchanged with the same fervour as cake recipes. A great-aunt reminisces about her own youthful cure. 3 drops of laudanum in lemon water, followed by a nap, which, she admits, made the world seem softer and the servants less noisy. Inevitably, someone mentions the latest Parisian craze, mineral water enemas. The ladies exchange glances, half shocked and half intrigued. Mrs. Fairfax, never one to be outdone, recounts her trip to a London hydropathic institute, where she endured a most bracing experience involving eucalyptus oil, a Turkish towel, and, she hints, a handsome young attendant. There is a moment of silence, then a ripple of giggles. Someone tops up the tea. The luncheon continues with an enthusiastic round of elixir tastings. Little bottles are passed from hand to hand, their labels promising everything from noble vitality to tranquility in times of trouble. You try a sip of Lady Stanhope's cordial. It's both medicinal and suspiciously alcoholic, making conversation easier and complaints about husbands more colourful. Dessert brings a change of pace. A gentle debate on the importance of internal cleansing, and a spirited exchange about the relative virtues of prunes, figs, and the occasional invigorating purge. By this point, you are convinced that Victorian women possessed both iron wills and remarkable digestive resilience. As the luncheon winds down, the ladies arrange themselves for a group portrait, each secretly relieved to have outlasted the others in the day's remedy parade. Invitations are exchanged for the next gathering, and you leave with a head full of new recipes and a handbag clinking gently with mysterious bottles. In Victorian England, the ladies' luncheon is never just about tea and cakes. It's a masterclass in etiquette, a support group for the perpetually unwell, and an informal pharmacy all rolled into one. When life's troubles arise, as they always do, there's nothing like a strong cup of tea, a good friend, and a discreetly labelled bottle in your reticule. No spectacle brightens a Victorian village quite like the arrival of a travelling medicine show. It's part carnival, part classroom, part fever dream, a swirling blend of banjo tunes, painted wagons, and bold promises shouted from a makeshift stage. The children gather first, their faces smudged and eager, soon joined by farmers, housewives, and skeptical old men whose default expression is "prove it." The air thrums with anticipation, and the faint scent of peppermint and liniment. The show always begins with fanfare. The master of ceremonies, a man in a velvet coat and hat with a feather the size of a pheasant, leaps onto a barrel, introducing himself as Professor Marvel, medical pioneer and world traveller. He launches into tales of adventure in far-off lands, of miraculous cures learned from wise shamans and kindly grandmothers. Every tale is wilder than the last. I once watched a tribesman in the Amazon leap 30 feet after a single sip of my invigorating elixir. The crowd gasps. Someone faints, mostly out of tradition. The professor's wagon is a rolling apothecary. Bottles and tins are artfully arranged. Miracle nerve syrup, electric coca elixir, Dr. Bliss's stamina drops. Each label features gold embossing, a testimonial from a satisfied customer or an anonymous bishop, and an assurance that the contents will not only cure your cold, but possibly improve your manners and financial prospects. A child tugs at your sleeve, whispering, "My cousin took the tonic. Now he's top of the class and can run faster than the vicar's dog." The first demonstration begins. A volunteer, usually the bravest-looking local, is called forward to test the professor's latest cure for rheumatism. A generous dose of the elixir is poured. "You'll feel a tingle," the professor warns, eyes twinkling. The volunteer drinks. After a dramatic pause and a discreet wink from the professor, the volunteer leaps off the stage, arms raised in triumph. The crowd erupts in applause. "It's a miracle!" someone cries. "Or perhaps a touch of gin," mutters a neighbor. Between demonstrations, assistants weave through the crowd, hawking bottles for $1 apiece. "Step right up. Why suffer another day?" they call. Money changes hands quickly, hope glinting in every eye. A father buys a tonic for his son's nightmares. A grandmother clutches a jar for the cat's nerves. A young woman hesitates, then buys 2 bottles, just in case. Of course, not everyone is convinced. The village doctor stands at the back, arms folded, muttering darkly about charlatans and dangerously excessive vitality. But even he can't help but be drawn in by the show, the music, the laughter, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, something here might actually work. After all, hope is the most powerful ingredient in any bottle. As dusk falls and the wagons pack up, the villagers disperse, clutching their new purchases and swapping tales of what they've just seen. By morning, most will have forgotten the professor's real name, but the legend of the miracle elixir will linger. Bottles will take pride of place on mantelpieces, their contents doled out sparingly. Each dose a blend of hype, hope, and just a pinch of hysteria. In the end, the medicine show delivers exactly what it promises: a night of magic, a taste of wonder, and the unshakable feeling that anything is possible, especially after a spoonful of something labeled guaranteed. If you ever wondered how Victorian England managed to stay so cheerfully confused about health, look no further than the penny press, the daily or weekly newspapers, cheap as chips and stuffed to the margins, with advice columns promising sound medical guidance for the modern age. Here, in black and white, the hopes and horrors of self-care unfold. The result is a patchwork of remedies, recommendations, and recipes that would make even the most seasoned apothecary weep, or possibly laugh out loud. You sit by the window, newspaper in hand, searching for wisdom. The doctor's corner headline is reassuring: "A cure for every complaint." But the letters that follow are pure Victorian chaos. "Dear Doctor," writes anxious in Aldershot, "what can I do for my persistent tiredness?" The answer is brisk. Begin each day with a brisk walk, a cold bath, and 2 teaspoons of coca wine before breakfast. If tiredness persists, avoid reading novels and consult your vicar. Sound, if you're a goose. Other readers have more delicate issues. "Dear Doctor, I have been troubled by wind after supper." The response: a daily enema, a diet of dry toast, and regular recitation of uplifting poetry will restore order to your internal organs. A modern reader may wonder if the real cure is simply not to ask in the first place. Children's complaints are met with alarming cheerfulness. For childhood night terrors, rub the soles of the feet with onion, then administer a teaspoon of soothing syrup. No mention is made of the syrup's tendency to induce brief but enthusiastic poker sessions at 2 a.m. For growing pains, the advice is even more spirited. Let the child run about barefoot in the garden and sprinkle them with vinegar at dusk. Of course, not all queries receive equal attention. The famously mysterious female complaints are treated with a blend of tact and total bewilderment. If nervous, take a restorative tonic. Avoid complicated conversation and retire early with a hot brick. Men's problems are solved with meat, beer, and the occasional outdoor exertion, sometimes all at once. The columns don't stop at remedies. There are lists of superstitions: never sneeze on a Tuesday, stern warnings against tight corsets, and lengthy essays on why reading French novels will lead to moral decay and neuralgia. The editors, faced with a weekly deluge of ailments, sometimes appear to make up advice on the spot. For melancholy, whistle a merry tune and dust the mantelpiece, they suggest, sidestepping actual medical science with the agility of a Victorian ballerina. There is, of course, a particular joy in the accidental poetry of these columns. To soothe a cough, stand by an open window at dawn and recite the Lord's Prayer backward. For a weak heart, avoid excitement and never eat peas. Some of this advice is genuinely harmless. After all, a good walk and a laugh can't hurt, but much is a jumble of folklore, quackery, and wishful thinking. As you fold the paper and finish your tea, you realize the true gift of the penny press wasn't in its accuracy, but in its optimism. The columns offered hope. If you followed the advice, maybe, just maybe, you'd wake up well tomorrow, or at least with a new story to tell. In Victorian England,